Check it out, guys! I built a tiny house. Come on inside and I'll show you around. Come on, you're gonna love it. My construction experience is extremely limited, so mistakes while building this project were inevitable, and I made plenty. But the more mistakes I made, the more I learned how to problem solve and work with imperfection. It's obviously not ideal to make mistakes, but it is good to know how to problem solve. I hope this video encourages y'all to start your own projects and build something cool, because if I was able to do it, I promise you can too. I've had a ton of fun building this project over the last couple of months. I want to say thank you to my mom and dad for helping me through this entire project, because without them, it definitely would not have turned out as well as it has, and it's beautiful and I love it, and I built it with my own hands. And since they did help me, I've learned so much. So thank you, Mom and Dad. Let's get into the build so that y'all can see how my tiny house got here. My tiny house is built on a 5x8 utility trailer, so I used the jack to level it as much as possible. The spare tire had to go. I needed everything to be ready for building. I removed the gate, which was just hanging on some hinges, and cleaned it off real good. There was kind of mulch everywhere.
Oh, that helps so much.
I was getting used to the skill saw and made a rather funky cut with a curve in it. I bolted my subfloor, which is 3/4 inch plywood, to the railing of my trailer. And drilling through this metal is no fun at all. It's rather hard and easy to break drill bits on, so I was kind of relieved when we were done with that. I cut triangle-shaped supports for the bump outs. My bump outs are just going to sit on these supports and it'll make them really strong. I secured them with these large lag screws. The bump outs are just going to add a little bit of space to each side of my tiny house so that the whole thing is wider. And they're going to be real strong with all those triangle supports I put underneath. I wound up with a wonderful foundation to build on. Making a correct foundation is probably the most important part of any project, but what is more exciting is when I get to start building up and walls start going up, because it's just so visually dramatic and I can really see things happening. I cut the siding and dry fitted it into place and cut a notch out of the bottom corner to match the bump out. When I knew the fit was satisfactory, I took it down to paint. And yes, this is my first time ever using Great Stuff, so I'm not real neat with it at all. Hello, Penny. Do you want to say hello? Yeah? Are you a good dog? Here is my blue. Got to use Great Stuff for the first time. Look at that. I put the siding back in place for the final time. We framed kind of the sidewall so that you could see what the roof is going to slope like on the top.
Way over, way over, way over.
Or something?
No.
This window was a little bit tricky just because I was not getting the measurements correctly, and I had to move my framing around a couple of times to get it to fit. So when it finally did, I was super happy about it. I have a window. Opens. Maybe. Yep. And stays open. My second wall is a mirror of the first, so it was simpler. This will be a reoccurring theme throughout this video, but I make a mess with caulk and great stuff pretty much every time I try to use either of them to seal up cracks, so y'all are just gonna have to know that. My back wall was more challenging to frame than the others, because factors like the door had to be considered.
Maybe. Oh yeah.
And when you're framing in a door, there's really no wiggle room. You can't just be like, oh, it's okay. You know, it's a tiny bit off square, it's not a problem. No, when you're putting a door in, it has to be really, really precise.
Don't put a ton of pressure on it. All right, when it stops dropping stuff, pull it out.
Okay. There's my tiny window. And I'm liquid nailing my window into place. So that thing is never coming out unless, I don't know, I don't even know how it would come out. Unless I take the whole tiny house apart, that window is staying put. And there's my door. I marked the top and bottom where it had to be cut to be the right height and fit it into place. But my problem was I had made the opening too tight. Since my door fit too tightly, I had to move the framing of the left side of my wall over this much between the pencil mark and where it is now. And then I liquid nailed it back together and painted it. Well guys, here's the finished product. So far, you see that gap between the board that lines the inside of the trailer and my stud on the end of the wall, you see that? Well, I don't really know what's up with that. I think basically this board is cupped a little bit, so that's why it looks like that, because they meet up down here. But basically my solution was just to make this stick out a little bit right here so that it'll meet up with my stud. So the door that I'm using is an 18-inch door, and basically I bought it from a Habitat Humanity store in my area. It is just an old interior closet door. So that means that it needs a lot of work, but I'm kind of determined to make it work, especially because it was only a $20 door. There's the rafters going up, and this was really exciting. It was like a huge visual thing to have the rafters going up because I could see exactly where the roof was going to be. Looky there, I'm standing under a roof. It's kind of crazy because I can really see this whole thing coming together. It's really amazing how much I've learned already just from basically framing in a tiny house on the back of a trailer. I feel like I've learned so much. I'm also just super excited because in the end of this project, I'm gonna have a cool tiny house that is my very own, and I'm so happy about it. I put rafter ties on the rafters to make sure these things aren't going anywhere. Well, that didn't quite fit the first try. The base layer of my roof is OSB. Getting on the roof for the first time kind of felt like a big deal, especially knowing that it could hold my weight. It was just like knowing that the tiny house was getting sturdy. It was really exciting.
Good. Boom.
And that's roofing paper, which is basically just waterproofing. It's kind of sticky, and whenever it gets hot, it'll like melt together a little bit and definitely keep water from leaking through the roof. And then my final layer is metal. And the metal, it was pretty simple to put up, not too hard, just 3 sheets of metal going up on the roof. And I was trying to pay really close attention to sealing every single detail, so all my little gaps got great stuff or caulk in them. I cut siding pretty close to the size it needed to be and painted it. It's basically completely dark and I still have to clean up all my paint stuff, so I better hurry and do that. But I'm well on my way to having most of my siding painted. This T111 that I'm using for siding absolutely drinks paint. It's like it soaks it in like a sponge, so it used quite a bit of paint. Then I cut my siding to the exact size it needed to be and put it up smoothly. Turns out it was a little too good to last. We just messed up. You see how the plywood is cut at the top, slanted upwards to match the roof on this side, and it all fits good. My problem is I have 2 more sheets of plywood that are supposed to go on the other side of my tiny house to fit that wall, and I completely cut them wrong, so they're ruined. I'm pretty mad about this right now because I know it could have been avoided if I had just put a little bit more thought into it and how I was cutting it and all of that. The whole reason I cut it in the first place was to just save some paint, basically. I ended up cutting them wrong and I can't use them now, so I'm gonna have to buy 2 new boards. Even though this really sucks right now, basically I'm just gonna keep moving forward and I'll have to buy some more wood and start the process over. And I know it's not the end of the world, I just am not where I wanted to be. Turns out my rough cuts that I was doing just to save paint didn't really save any paint. Because when I got new sheets, I just painted the entire sheets just to be safe.
The window and it's in place. Oh. Yeah.
My mom likes to say a lot, "Welcome to real life, kid." And it's kind of like, yeah, it is real life. In real life, everything doesn't go perfectly, and when you mess things up, you've got to learn how to deal with it. So, in a way, I was kind of glad that I made that mistake, at least later, not at the time, because I was able to fix it.
We don't have anything at all. There's no way to grab a hold of it.
Cutting out this window was pretty tough because I didn't have an exact spot to measure from, but it ended up working out even though I had to measure and mark a lot, and I only got 1 chance at cutting it, so it was a little bit nerve-wracking.
All right.
Isn't that awesome? I'm praising the Lord that we got this window thing right, because goodness, I wasn't sure for a second. We didn't really know how to do it, but it worked out and it looks really good. It's not just gonna work, it's actually right. So I'm so glad and kind of proud that we figured it out. I'm sitting in a legitimate doorway, and the inside of my house is an absolute echo fest, and it's hot. Oh yeah, I painted the rest of that eave too. It's all white now. With everything I do, my goal is to give glory to my God. So since He's given me the opportunity to build this tiny house, I want to just take a minute to write a couple of scripture verses on the wall that are dear to my heart, just so I can take a minute to give thanks to my God for what He's allowed me to do. Rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. And give thanks to the Lord, for He is good, His love endures forever. But I just wanted to write in my tiny house today as a reminder to be thankful for the opportunity that I've been given to build this tiny house, and a reminder to always give glory to my God for the things that He allows me to do. My first piece of furniture. I totally bought the stool at my neighbor's yard sale for $1 or $2, but I've got a plan for this stool, also known as my first piece of furniture. I'm starting with taking a plain old wet rag and wiping it down good. I gave the nut right in the middle of my stool about a half turn with a ratchet, and wow, the legs tightened up so much. I'm way more confident in it now. So, step C is going to be prepare the stool for painting. We're all taped up and ready to go. I'm gonna take my kills my stool before I put on the final coat. It's pretty much finished, and I'm going to take my painter's tape off. Ha ha ha, look at this thing. Look at that piece of furniture. It's good, it's a good stool. By the time I added the top of my wall and rafter height, I realized I had not cut the siding on my back wall tall enough. So I just used this scrap piece of T111 as a fill-in and put a giant piece of trim on top of it to cover everything. It ended up looking really good. And then I had a bit of a trim painting party because it was time to get serious on trim, which I know trim is not the most exciting thing in the world, but good grief, it makes a world of difference just visually. I drilled every single place that a screw was going to go in so that the screws wouldn't split my trim, because they're just thin little 1x boards, so it's really easy to split them with screws. My windows were doing a little bit of a funky thing with sticking out, so I used a really thin piece of plywood, 5mm plywood, to fill in and let my trim rest on it. For the inside, I used thin insulation. I believe it had an R value of 3.5, which is just about the thinnest insulation you can buy. And I did this because I do not need thick insulation living in North Alabama. It's just our winters don't get very cold, and I did not need thick insulation.
Clothes stuck in the windows.
My ceiling turned out so beautiful. I was super happy with it. These are just 1x10 boards that I screwed on the ceiling, and I really like them. Now that we're getting close to the end, everything seems real exciting. And also, it's so much less echoey in here now that we have insulation and a ceiling and panels on one wall. I got to work putting up the siding for my inside. I used a 1/2 inch, maybe just a little bit less than 1/2 inch, T111. And the reason I did this is because this thin T111 was very affordable. I decided not to design the inside too much until I got to the inside so that I could figure out how much money I had already spent and how much I had left to spend, and then I would figure out the best way to use it. And I put a lot of effort into this back wall using pretty shiplap and making sure it all looked really good so that I could have this one statement piece on the inside of my tiny house. At least that was kind of my thinking while designing the inside. It's an exciting milestone, guys. There's no more insulation visible. And you know, touch-up paint changed everything. There were little beads of caulk everywhere that just really looked pretty ugly, and by the time I was done touch-up painting, the whole house looked different. It looked fresh and clean, and it was really nice. Flooring, I just did something really simple, which was using 5mm plywood, and I put down that plywood on top of my subfloor. I nailed it down, and I also liquid nailed it down. There were scuff marks on my shiplap wall from dirty fingers and the hammer, so my magic eraser really spruced the thing up.
Isn't that pretty?
Remember this cupped board problem from a while ago? Well, it created an awkward hole on the inside, but I was able to fix it with a little piece of discreet trim. There's my baseboards. This piece of trim goes in this corner, and because of this little hiccup right here, I had to cut out just a teeny tiny notch out of the corner of this trim to go around the tiny hiccup. And now it fits perfectly. The checklist is ticking down, guys. Trim is basically completely done. Maybe there's a piece somewhere left to put up that I'm not thinking about, but the trim is basically done. So now I can count down the steps that have to be done until this tiny house is completed, which is bed frame, door, table, and then it's done. I've worked really hard on this and I'm really proud of how it's turning out. A little snow, there we go. And that is my incorrectly cut siding from earlier. You remember when I made that mistake and cut the slope of the siding wrong so it wouldn't fit on the outside? Well, I was able to use a good chunk of it for the top of my bed. I've just got to say that I have been dreading this door for a little while because I know that installing a door is tough. Getting it all to line up and latch correctly is really tough. And I assure you, my dad and I had no easy time with it. I think we put it up and took it back down a total of 6 times before we finally settled with it. It's absolutely not a perfect door, but it works. It latches correctly, it opens, it closes, it does everything that I need it to. It's the best solution that we came up with, so I'm going to show it to you. We tried and tried and tried several times to get this fixed. Could not figure it out, but I'll show you just one thing, the thing that drives me the most crazy about the door. It opens to right there, and it hits the floor. But overall, I mean, I can't complain. It took a little bit of patience and some frustration, but look at that. I'm gonna build a little table in that corner, but when I say little, I mean really little. It's not gonna be anything fancy. It may take an hour or 2 to put together if I had to guess. And after that, just a little bit of door trimming and a small table. As far as I can tell, it's done. My weather stripping just had a sticker that peeled off the back and then it stuck to the frame around the door. It was time for the moment of truth. At least moment of truth number 99, it felt like to me. And I was very nervous about moving this house, especially since I was just moving it like across a pasture because it's kind of built to go on a road, but it did really well. This is it, guys. The tiny house is at its final resting spot, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I'm ready to spend the night. It's so quiet. It's a really cool thought to think that tonight I'm going to sleep underneath a roof and in between 4 walls that I built. You know, I've never really been able to say that before. This is kind of my first big construction project, and there's tons of little imperfections that I could point out. Even though it's not a perfect project, it still turned out wonderfully, at least in my eyes, because I built it. So now it's time for bed, and I can hardly believe it, guys. I'm gonna sleep in the tiny house tonight. It's raining a little bit, but I am dry and warm. Good night. Good morning. I slept so well last night, guys. My night of camping is over. Bye, guys. Have a great day. For a finishing touch, I decided to put up some stickers on my shiplap wall. These stickers represent some past adventures that I've gone on, like I have a LeConte sticker on that wall, and I hiked to the top of Mount LeConte with my dad for my 11th birthday, and I have a Great Smoky Mountain Gregory Bald sticker, which is special because my mom and I just hiked to Gregory Bald like last month for my 16th birthday. I have a little St. Andrews State Park sticker, which is from a state park in Florida that I went to once, just things like that. And then I also have an Appalachian Trail sticker, which is a future adventure that I hope to go on one day. So I've been collecting these stickers for a while, and I thought, what a better place to use them than my tiny house. I used 2 books to help me while I was building this project. One is called Building Your Tiny House Dream by Chris Shaptic, and the other one is called Micro Shelters by Derek Diedrichsen. I think that's how you say it. Y'all can see his name at the bottom. And with these 2 books, like I took the bump out ideas from this book, and I took the idea for my roof for this book, and then I used a bunch of my own ideas for some other things, and with all of that combined, I built this tiny house. Very soon I'm going to have a video coming out that is just about the cost breakdown for this tiny house, and I'll let y'all know in that video how much it cost me to build this tiny house if any of y'all are curious. But for right now, I have a completed tiny house and I can't wait to just keep using it and hopefully take it somewhere one day. And I don't know, there's just tons of possibilities that I could do with it. I'm super excited. Thank you guys for watching today's video. I hope y'all enjoyed this tiny house build. I hope you found it interesting, maybe a little bit helpful, and I hope to see you on the next one.